Warning: the following video contains explicit language which may be offensive to some viewers or inappropriate for children. The content within this video is intended for mature audiences only.
Hello, this is the point where everybody should be, if you're, interested in rabbits and stuff. This is the final part to the final episode of season 1. The title of this episode is The Future We Deserve, and it is episode 10. So let's jump into it.
All of them wearing masks. As advertised, it was definitely a masquerade party. Time felt strange here, elusive. My eyes were drawn immediately to one figure as she moved across the room.
Yeah, that is not a pleasant feeling to have. I've had similar feelings entering like large groups or large gatherings, things like weddings and, family reunions, class reunions, stuff like that, that you get in there and you just have this queer feeling all through you that somehow you're out of place.
A slender female with long dark hair. She wore a beautiful porcelain mask. The mask of a rabbit.
Ba-ba-ba-bum.
I moved through the crowd toward the woman in the mask. I couldn't tell you if anybody noticed me or not. I was focused on nothing but the woman.
And that's tunnel vision. I think everyone's probably at some point in their life experienced tunnel vision. So let's find out who the woman in the porcelain rabbit mask is.
I saw her enter a room at the end of a long hall. I made my way through the crowded hall toward the door and burst into the room. But the room was empty. It was a bedroom. There was a king-sized bed and a small love seat. I looked under the bed and in the closet, but there was nobody there. The woman in the mask just disappeared.
And that's got to be unsettling. Just very unsettling, to be honest with you.
I turned back toward the hallway and saw the figures in gray. There were no longer any party guests. Jones was nowhere to be seen. Everyone had become or been replaced by a figure in gray. I couldn't make out any faces. It was as if looking directly at them was impossible.
Yeah, that in some science fiction realms, that could be evidence of dimensional traveling or being in a dimension different from ours and projecting yourself into another dimension.
Out of the corner of my eye, I felt like I could see them better, but their faces remained obscured. They appeared to be wearing the masks of the party guests, which was unsettling. But not as unsettling as the fact that everyone was completely silent.
Yeah, when you have a large crowd of people and then all of a sudden everyone goes silent and they're all looking at you, Yeah, that's unnerving.
It was a strange and terrifying total silence. Then, they slowly started walking toward me, toward the room at the end of the hall. Just before they were about to reach me, I spun around and re-entered the bedroom, shutting the door behind me.
Now, the question you have to ask is, with it previously being noted that under high stress that people like her or Jones would shift realities, jump from one dimension to another dimension. Do you think maybe that happened to her when she went into the bedroom and came back out, that she jumped realities, and the reality when she went back in was completely different from the one she left?
That's when I saw her. She was sleeping on the love seat, white rabbit mask on the floor. It was Yumiko. She woke up and rubbed her eyes.
Then, when she re-entered the bedroom, because of the stress caused by all the partygoers now dressed like wardens, who what we have been led to believe are wardens, then when she re-entered the bedroom, she re-entered from her original, or the dimension that she left when she was following Yumiko.
Yumiko was fine, but she didn't remember anything at all. In fact, the last thing she remembered was being at home, listening to music, the night she disappeared.
And that's got to be a hell of a mind trip, because waking up like that, however long, probably months, maybe 6, 8, maybe even 10 months, just having no memory. I mean, we don't really get a hard timeline of how these events transpired. I mean, are there gaps, days, weeks between, things featured in the episode? Or are there things in the episode that have been, for the convenience of time, squished together that took place over a long period of time? So, you've got, you can speculate any way you want to on how long it's been since she disappeared, since Yumiko disappeared, and Carly found her.
After a few calls back and forth, the Canadian authorities finally arrived on the island. They told me later that they found me in a pretty bad way. The way I looked, the things I was saying. On drugs, they said. It was the same once we got back to Seattle. I continued to tell them everything I remembered, and they were diligent about writing it down and recording everything. But I could tell from pretty early on that they thought I was either nuts, under the influence of hallucinogenic narcotics, or both.
Or possibly the fact that she was under the influence of hallucinogenic narcotics made her crazy.
The detective looking into Yumiko's disappearance indicated that she believed a lack of sleep and a great deal of pressure and stress probably had something to do with everything that had happened to me. They were looking into the producer, but they appeared to be coming up empty there. Neither he nor Yumiko appeared to recognize each other. To complicate things further, the producer hadn't been living in his house on Galliano Island. In fact, it had been sitting there empty for the last 6 months. Which brings us to Jones.
And I don't want to spoil anything, but I'll go ahead and wait till after she discusses Jones and throw my 2 cents in after that.
The police eventually managed to track down the border crossing photos of the license plate and driver's side camera of that silver Saab 900. Jones was driving, and the car was registered to him. The police were looking for him. Jones's real name was Jeremy Carruth. Yumiko looked at his picture. She couldn't remember ever seeing him before in her life. They believed that the most likely theory was that Jones had taken Yumiko to the island and kept her prisoner there, perhaps drugged for some sinister purpose. This would explain her memory loss and the traces of benzodiazepines in her system.
And benzos, don't like those. I even hate getting any kind of benzo, any variant of it in prescribed medicine. Those just, I don't, my body doesn't handle benzos real well. My brain really doesn't handle benzos real well. Through youthful experimentation, I know my body loves and my brain loves stimulants. So yeah, I think that the whole thing is kind of crazy.
I was tested for drugs as well, and there were 2 conflicting toxicology reports. One was clean, but the other indicated possible trace amounts of LSD in my system.
The problem with that, and I have to point it out just because the science behind it, it makes really good for a story to find traces of LSD. But unfortunately, the reality is that within minutes of you ingesting LSD 25 or lysergic acid diethylamide, it's untraceable in your system. So unless they did a spinal tap or did a hair follicle test, which I doubt a police department's going to run and do because of the expense involved, that's just one of the things that kind of takes me out of the immersion because I know the science behind it. And it goes the same with dimethyltryptamine or DMT and psilocybin. So yeah, it makes good for a story, but it's kind of hard to justify if you know the science. But that's where suspended disbelief comes in. You got to kind of roll with it.
They had me examined by a psychiatrist who said something about extreme duress and prescribed some medication to help me get through any rough patches I might be experiencing. The psychiatrist recommended I start attending weekly counseling sessions immediately. As far as Jones, or Jeremy Carruth, goes, he had a long history of institutionalization. Apparently, he'd been in and out of medical facilities his entire life. His longer stays were for schizophrenia and extreme paranoia.
Now, what you have to wonder is if his institutionalization and confinement in a sanitarium, was he actually crazy, or were there forces in the game punishing him for not finishing the 8th iteration of the game? Those are things you have to keep in your mind. Plus, you also got to look at, too, the whole idea of slipping realities. Did they at some point slip out of the reality that her Jones was helping her in Lucid to a reality where his counterpart was schizophrenic?
Reports indicated that, as a child, he would create false realities and attempt to live his life in complex make-believe worlds. They said he most likely did this to escape the reality of his home life, his abusive parents. While living in a kind of minimum security home care situation in 2008, Jeremy Carruth, working under the name Jerusalem Jones, allegedly came up with the most complex alternate reality game ever created up to that point. It was a game called Moonrise. In 1998, Carruth was accused of providing large doses of benzodiazepines to his then-girlfriend, Emily Masterson. These allegations were never substantiated. Emily overdosed on a combination of that medication and antidepressants later that year. This led Carruth into a spiral of depression that would last until at least 2007.
Like I said earlier, did they slip realities to a different reality? Or is the game punishing him for not completing the 8th iteration? Those are the questions that are kind of out there in the wind.
The police eventually decided that both Yumiko and myself may have been the victims of some kind of brainwashing or Stockholm Syndrome situation, where we were fed doses of LSD and benzodiazepines, drugs notorious for affecting both short and long-term memory, and that Jeremy Carruth was responsible.
The problem with the police, and the police probably acting in good faith without checking into, or having the ability to check into, like The Magician or Scorpio or any of that, they may be acting in good faith, or they could be agents of the game. The particular officers that they're interacting with could be agents of the game to try to muddy the waters.
I spoke with Yumiko at length about her audio recordings, that video, and everything else, but she didn't remember any of it. She firmly believed that Rabbids was nothing more than a weird game, and although she was worried about her missing time, she felt fine, and really just wanted to get on with her life. I eventually convinced Yumiko to try hypnosis and a few other forms of regression therapy, but nothing worked. Her memories appeared to be lost. It didn't take long before the calls from the police stopped, and all thoughts of Jones and Rabbids seemed to fade from Yumiko's mind. My mind, however, was another story.
And see, that makes you wonder, was Yumiko a participant in the game? Or was she bait to lure Carly into the game?
Could Jones really have made all of this up? Hired people to play wardens? Had I been drugged somehow? Did he spike my drink before we got on that ferry? Is that why I was feeling so strange on that island? Or was it because we were actually close to creating some kind of slip? Could he have somehow accessed Gatewick Industries Subproject 54, that top-secret concussion program that used sub-oral frequency blasts to erase Yumiko's memory? Or was Jones on the level?
And that is the question that is at the heart of this whole episode, or this whole last part of this episode.
Had we actually completed something? Did we facilitate the slip? Were we now living in an altered reality? Did we save the world? If so, where was Jones? Sometimes I was certain that it was real, that Jones and I did complete something important. Other times, I felt like the possibility that some ancient game might actually be capable of altering dimensions was ridiculous, and I couldn't believe that I'd ever actually entertained the thought.
And that is probably a natural... Actually, I won't say probably. I said that is a natural reaction to something as traumatic as what she just lived through.
Most of the time, my thoughts would tend to the former. There were just too many things that didn't make sense otherwise. But there were a couple of things that forced me to seriously consider the latter option. One was Christina's world. Every version of the painting I could find, including all of the digital copies on my phone and computer, were normal. 2 windows in the farmhouse, not 3. There was no evidence that a version with 3 windows had ever existed.
Maybe not in that reality.
But I clearly remember that painting. I clearly remember 3 windows. The second thing was a meeting that I had with the president of a company called Gatewick Industries, a few weeks after the incident at Galliano Island.
Carly Parker?
Yes.
Morris Nevin. It's nice to meet you.
Thank you for agreeing to meet with me.
Of course. I understand you have a couple of questions about what we do here at Gatewick Industries.
Well, I was just basically wondering what you do.
Well, the easiest answer is we make games.
What kind of games?
We started with role-playing and card games back in the 80s. These days, we're pretty big into virtual and augmented reality. Our newest beta games are inspired by LARPing. Do you know what that is?
Live action role playing, right?
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Yes, our version of LARPing is a bit more ambitious.
Like how?
Well, kind of like real life. You know, like the David Fincher movie, The Game.
And see, this is where you get your shadow of doubt, your uneasiness on what's real and what's not.
Right.
Let's just say that we've been developing something unique. A game where the playing field is actually real life.
Like an alternate reality game.
Yes, but much more ambitious than anything that's been tried before. Kind of like the game in your podcast. But, of course, our game isn't actually dangerous.
Now, that should send up all kinds of red flags and alarms that these people at Gatwick are listening to her podcast.
Of course. How come you don't have an online presence?
We find that it takes away the mystery.
Right. Do you know anything about my parents working for Gatwick? Or taking part in any experiments?
I looked up their names. I'm afraid there's nothing.
And what about Jeremy Carruth? He was working for you. For Gatwick.
Wish that wasn't the case, but somehow he managed to pass our screening process. We believe that Carruth, or somebody working on his behalf, hacked into certain systems. Mr. Carruth was beta testing something for us. He worked on the fringes of the design team, doing some game testing for some of our new augmented reality stuff.
Now, if you're a shady Black Ops quasi-government funded secret organization, these are the kind of answers you expect. But if they're just a legitimate gaming house, those are also the answers you're going to get. So it's all in how you interpret it.
He agreed to participate in part of our first live-action simulation.
A game.
Like a beta version, yes. We had a team of operatives follow him around. It was kind of a logistics test for our new spy property, to help establish parameters for real-life gameplay.
You had people following him?
Yes.
People dressed in gray?
Why, yes. The game was called Grey Ops. I heard that you saw a few of our people during your experience with Mr. Carruth.
I did.
Well, they were instructed to make no contact.
They didn't.
Great. Are there any additional questions that I can answer for you?
Well, is your spy game Grey Ops?
Yes.
Is it happening?
Well, not in that form. We are reworking it for VR. We decided that at the present time, real-world gameplay is just too complex and unpredictable.
I don't know. His answers to me seem too scripted, just to be honest with you. Just my own take on it. So, it is what it is. I'd love to hear your opinions in the comments, what you think of not only this, this part of the episode, but of the whole season 1.
Right. I didn't know what to think. If I say that I believe in multi-dimensional slips capable of realigning our world or universe, am I crazy? Was the story I just told you corrupt? False?
The inverse of that question is, if she didn't share it with us, would she be crazy?
My imagination gone wild. What about the moonrise? My brother showed me that image when I was just a kid, and there were just so many things that couldn't be explained away. And I would absolutely know if I was being drugged and manipulated. Wouldn't I?
Not if the person who was doing it was a pro.
It wasn't long after Yumiko's return that I paid a visit to the Magician's bar/arcade. Only, it was no longer a bar/arcade. It was a convenience store with a few small tables where you could drink coffee. The place was called Spino's. It looked brand new. I asked Theodore, the owner, how long it had been there, and he told me that they just opened yesterday. I asked him what had happened to the arcade that had been there before, He told me he thought it had previously been a coffee shop. He wasn't sure, as the place had been completely empty when he and his husband leased it a week or so back. I went to the back of the store to grab a drink, and that's when I saw it.
Yes. Always got to leave the audience with a little bit of doubt and suspicion.
It was standing in the far corner. It was an arcade game. I couldn't tell what game it was. The cabinet was black. There were no graphics of any kind, anywhere. I noticed there was a video game in your back room.
It was there when we leased the place, just sitting in the middle of the room.
Oh.
We told the owner, but they had no idea. Told us we could keep it.
Does it work?
I don't know. But it turns on.
Would you be willing to let me take a look at it?
You want to buy it?
Maybe.
Knock yourself out.
Thanks.
So, we get to see with this game how everything ties together.
Oh, I returned to the back of the store, plugged it in, and waited. A few seconds later, Stargate booted up. I popped in a quarter and was about to play the game when I had a thought. I decided to try the Easter egg trick first. It took me a couple of tries to get it right. But when I finally did it, I wasn't completely surprised to see the results. It was the circle. Just like at the magician's old place, the first 7 names were there, in order, per usual. But this version of the circle was different. Beside the number 8, instead of a dash, there was a name. Hazel. And sitting there, after the number 9, was another name. Parker Carlson. While I was standing there, staring.
Yeah, I imagine that at its best is unnerving, and with everything she's went through, it's probably even crazier.
At the names on that screen, the number 10 popped up at the bottom of the list, out of nowhere, and started flashing. So, I dropped in another quarter and started playing the game. It's Rabbits. I'm Carly Parker. Until next time, stay safe.
So that is season 1 of Rabbits. For those people that wanted to go listen to it independently, that's cool. And the people that were happy enough just to listen to it with my commentary, that's cool too. And I invite everyone, if you've paid attention through all the episodes, whether you listen to it with my commentary or you listen to it independently, in the comments below, put your ideas, what you think, how you think it played out. So next video, we're going to look at the path. The intro for that video is going to probably be fairly long because I'm going to show off some of the artwork for like these path cards, and we'll go from there. So until next time, have fun, be safe, peace.